Hi everyone and welcome back. We're going to keep having a play around with Landing Zone Accelerator, but now this time we're going to use the network config to deploy some VPCs and a transit gateway into our accounts. So here's a high level diagram of what we're going to do. So we're going to deploy two VPCs, private and public, into our development account and into our shared services account. And then we're going to deploy a transit gateway into the network account and link them all up with transit gateway attachments. So what we'll start off with is deploying the VPCs into the development and shared services account. So we'll hop over to our config file. So here's our network config file. As you can see, we can specify config for transit gateways, endpoint policies, and VPCs. So let's start building out a VPC. So we'll call the first one, the name of it is for our development, so we'll call it development VPC. We're going to give it an account, so we want to deploy it into our development account, into the region. AP Southeast 2 is the region where we want it. So let's now specify a CIDR range. So we'll just go with 10.0.0.0/16, and we're going to put some other we're going to say internet gateways. We'll say no, I don't want internet gateways, so we'll say false. We'll now set the instance tenancy, so we'll just keep this as default. We can also set the route tables, so let's put in we're going to have a private and a public subnet, so we'll create a private route table. Sorry, got to call it name, private route table. Now we won't put any routes in at the moment, so we'll just leave the routes as blank. We'll create another one for the public. So again, it'll be name, we'll call it public RT for public route table. And then again, we will, we'll just copy this, make it easier. There we go. All right, and we'll just call that public. That's fine. And we'll leave the routes as blank. All good. So now that we've done that, we can create some subnets. So again, we'll just create one subnet for the private, and we'll call it A because we'll put it in availability zone A. So now we'll select the availability zone A. Let's call it the route table. So we'll associate it with a private route table that we created earlier. We'll give it we'll assign it a subnet CIDR range. So for the sake of it, we'll call it 10.0.1.0/24. We'll give it a /24 subnet. And that's it. So that will now create a private subnet for us. So we can copy that and use the same syntax to now create a public one. So we'll just call it public A. We'll call it .2/24. Cool. That's all good. Okay, cool. So now we'll go down and need to, I forgot to enter in enable DNS. So we need to enable DNS host name. We'll set that to true. And we also need to enable DNS support, and we're in that true as well. So that's all good. So now this is all the code we need, or this is all the config we need to be able to, oops, forgot to change that to public. Cool, so this is now all the configuration we need to deploy a VPC into our development account. So we can take this and we can copy it, and we can now use the same config to deploy into our shared services account. So we'll just take a copy of it and we'll put it below. And there we go. I've basically used the copy, but I've set up everything as shared services, changed the naming convention. I've changed the IP subnet addresses and all the naming conventions to reflect the shared services. So we can now commit this to our repository, and we'll say add development account and shared services, VPCs, and we'll commit that, and we'll go yes. We'll sync the changes up to the code commit repository. Cool, so now we can jump over to the console. We're now in our master account. We can go to the code pipeline and we can click on the accelerator pipeline, release change. We'll release it. Cool, and then we'll let that run through and we can come back once that's complete and it should have completed successfully. So we'll just wait for that to run through. Alright, we're back after some time. So as you can see, it's all green ticks, which means the pipeline has executed successfully, which is awesome. So no errors there. So now we can jump over to our development accounts and we can have a look in here, and it should have deployed for us a VPC. So as you can see, we've got two VPCs. One will be the default control tower one, and there we go, there's our development VPC. With the CIDR range that we specified, we can see our two subnets, and we can see our two route tables. Same as if we go to our shared services account. Again, we should be able to see the same configuration, but in our shared services account. So there it is, there's our shared services VPC, our shared services subnets, and our shared services route table. Alright, so we've got our VPCs deployed, so now we can go ahead and deploy the transit gateway. So we're going to deploy the transit gateway into the networking account. So we'll call it core networks. This is going to be the core of our network. We'll put it in the account. We want to put it in the network account. We're going to, obviously, region again. We need to specify region. It's going to be an AP Southeast 2. We want to share it. So this is where we want to share with the accounts that we have the VPCs in. So in this instance, we're going to share it with organizational units. So we want to share it with the development organizational unit and the shared services organizational unit, because that's where the two accounts live that we want to share the transit gateway with. We can just send an ASN here, that's fine. DNS support, so we want to enable DNS support for the transit gateway. A few other bits, a few other config here that it requires. We want to set the default route table to associations to disable, because we'll associate those when we set up the attachments, and same with the propagation, so we'll specify that when we set up the attachments, so we can disable both of those. What have we got? Auto accept. So this is important. We want to be able to auto accept the sharing attachments so that we don't have to go in and manually accept those. So we'll enable that. And now we'll set up a route table. So we want a route table that will allow our development and shared services accounts to be able to route to each other. So we'll call it network dev route table. We will leave the routes as blank at the moment. And that should be all it. So that's literally all we need to deploy and share out a transit gateway in the network account. So the next thing is we need to set up some attachments in our VPCs to be able to connect to that transit gateway. So if we come down here below the subnets, in our development one, we can set up the transit gateway attachment. So we just specify transit gateway attachment, and we then go name. We'll call it dev because it's in our dev account, TGW attachment. We can then go and specify the transit gateway that we're going to connect it to. So this is going to be the name of the transit gateway that created earlier. So this is the one up here, so core network. That's where we want it to connect to. And the account is the network account, so that's where the transit gateway lives. All good. So now if we want to do some route table configuration, so we want the attachment, so we want this VPC to be associated with the route table we created earlier for the transit gateway. So if we go up here, that is the network dev route table. So we want that to be associated with that. The route propagations, again, we'll associate it with that route table so that the routes will propagate. And then that should be, that's right, sorry, we now want to associate the attachment with the subnet. So we want our private subnets to be able to communicate via the transit gateway, so we'll associate it with the private subnet. And that's what we need. So again, we can copy that, and then we can come down here and we can do the same thing for our shared services, obviously changing the naming. We'll keep the route table association correct. So we should need, actually, sorry, I forgot one thing. So we then need to set up the routes on the private route table and point the default route to the transit gateway in both the dev and the shared services account, so that they know to push the IP address ranges to the transit gateway. All right, so we've run that. We've run the pipeline again. I didn't show that because it's the same as before. It's all run successfully. So now we can go into our network account, and if we have a look at our network account, we should have a VPC created. We should have a transit gateway created, no VPC in this account. If we come in here, yep, there we go. We can see our core network transit gateway has been created. And if we have a look at the sharing, so if we go to sharing, we can see that it's being shared out. If we right click on that resource share, we can see that it's actually configured it for us in the resource access manager. So we can have a look at that quickly. There's resource access manager. And there's our transit gateway being shared out to accounts that are in the OUs that we specified, and there's the organisational units. And there we go. So now if we come back to here, and we can look at the transit gateway attachments. So here we go, we can see the two attachments, the dev and the shared services that we set up. And here's the route table that we set up for those, and the routes are in there, and we can see our CIDR ranges for each of our subnets that we set up. And the like. And again, if we then go into our shared services account, if we jump into the VPC, we should be able to see the attachment that we deployed. So if we go down to transit gateway, keep going down, and there it is, transit gateway attachments. And there's the attachment that we deployed with the naming convention that we set. So that's all good, and then we should be able to see in the route tables for the private route table. Yep, we should be able to see the routes going in, and the default route is pointed to the transit gateway. So as you can see, if we look at the development account, we should see the same. But as you can see, Landing Zone Accelerator makes it very easy and very quick to deploy networking in your accounts, set up transit gateways, set up your route tables, and the like, with very minimum code and very very quickly. So as we can see here, we've got it all configured. And look, I just think that is awesome how quickly and you can do that. So look, I hope everyone's enjoyed that, and I'll see you on the next one.